Gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah, guys. Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you, Heel Tough Blog podcast here on a Thursday night. Forgive me, a little bit rusty because it's been a little bit since we've talked to you here on the podcast. These last couple of weeks have just been crazy, even in the bye week for Carolina. And so we've had to adjust some things. You guys saw that the grades, midseason grades, which are on the website right now at heeltoughblog.com. They did not come out until yesterday. So we're kind of catching up here, doing some of the midseason stuff that we like to do here right before we get you ready for Carolina's game on Saturday afternoon up there in Charlottesville as the South's oldest rivalry renews. We'll do that preview tomorrow night. But since we had Thursday available, this was the perfect time to come on here and talk about what's going on for Carolina in the 2025 recruiting class. I know a lot of people are panicked about what's happening. How is Carolina losing 2 commitments from a class that only had 14 already? So I'll try to explain that a little bit, what's going on there and what could ultimately end up happening to that class altogether. And also, I'm going to tell you what I want to see, 5 things that I want to see from Carolina as we go into the second half of this season. It has not been great. There's no doubt about that. This 4-game losing streak that Carolina's on right now is as frustrating as really any stretch of Tar Heel football that we've seen since Larry Fedora was here on campus. And that's saying a lot, considering that the last few years, the way that seasons have ended have been frustrating. And then that 2021 season all around was incredibly frustrating. But this year, I think a lot of people were feeling as the season went along or as the season approached that there was a chance Carolina could be pretty decent. And right now, that just does not seem to be the case. But as I mentioned, we're going to start out talking a little bit about recruiting because everybody is kind of panicked. And look, here's the thing. You could say, well, this is all due to the results on the field for Carolina. I think to a certain extent that can be true. I think this has more to do with the fact that it seems more and more likely that this is the last season that Mack Brown is going to be in Chapel Hill. I think that's the big thing that is leading to a lot of these decommitments. And look, there are some teams that are succeeding, that are going after some of these guys, and I'll get to the decommitments here in just a second. But I do think that a big part of this is the fact that it looks like this is probably the end of this season for Mack Brown at Carolina. They're going to move in a different direction. Mac Brown's going to either go off into retirement, maybe try to become some sort of ambassador for the sport. Who knows? Maybe he even goes back into television, but I think that's playing a big role. So it started on Sunday night when you get the news that Logan Farrell is decommitting from Carolina, is flipping his commitment to Illinois. Now, the thing is that this is a recruitment by Illinois that probably has changed dramatically in the last month or so, because here's the thing. Illinois was always on him. He was an in-state kid. They always wanted him. But Illinois was not exactly the most attractive destination because, well, they frankly had struggled. The way they're playing right now, though, Luke Altmaier, the transfer from Ole Miss, who has taken over a quarterback there, he's led them to a ton of success. That team is 6-1 so far this year. And so now Brett Bielema has a legitimate leg to stand on when it comes to recruiting some of these incredibly talented guys out of the Chicago area, which is where Logan Farrell is from. Carolina did a great job swooping in there, picking up his commitment back at that time. But ultimately, you knew a guy that is as far away from Chapel Hill like that, if an in-state team was to start having some sort of success, then it would leave them susceptible for them to potentially pick them off. And they do that here. That one, a little more shocking just because we hadn't really heard any buildup to that. He took a visit to campus Saturday, liked what he saw, ends up flipping his commitment on Sunday. Then you have just mere hours later in the middle of the afternoon on Monday, Marshall Pritchett Jr. ends up flipping his commitment from Carolina to Alabama. Now, this one should not have caught anybody off guard. We wrote an article about this. Many people had been talking about this, a lot of crystal ball predictions after he took a visit to Tuscaloosa for Bama's win over Georgia. Now, look, Bama has not looked great since that game, but it doesn't really matter. When Alabama comes calling, you're going to be someone that, it's hard not to be tempted by what they're putting out there. I know that it's not Nick Saban. I know that now you're really wondering what exactly Kalen DeBoer is going to be able to do there. This is Alabama. They're still going to be able to win at an incredibly high rate. They're still arguably the most prestigious program in the history of college football. And so I don't blame Marshall Pritchett Jr. for this at all. It sucks. He was a guy that was on the rise, is having an amazing senior season at Rabun Gap School, which is, just taking over in some of these great matchups that they've had. I mean, absolutely dominated Providence Day, one of the state powers here in North Carolina, and one of those teams that people were talking about nationally coming into the year. But he's looked really good as a receiver, doing a ton of what we expected he was going to be able to do. And he'll be an incredibly versatile receiving weapon for Alabama. That takes him away from Carolina. And look, this is the biggest problem with these decommitments is you combine them together. That means that both of your tight end commitments in this class are now gone. The thing that was comforting when we were talking about Pritchett's possible decommitment right after he took that trip to Tuscaloosa was that, hey, at least you've still got Logan Farrell that's on with you. Now, that's not the case. Now you're going to have to scramble to potentially find somebody. Honestly, I think at this point, you're probably not finding somebody unless there is an incredibly late bloomer that comes from in-state. We've seen it a couple of times before. The one that most recently comes to mind for me that Carolina went out and got a guy late. Remember, Michael Short was a guy that sort of popped up on the radar late out of Mallard Creek, had a really, really good senior season there. Carolina swoops in and picks up his commitment after he was originally committed to East Carolina. That would probably be the hope for the Tar Heels at this point. But ultimately, it's like I said, this class right now, you're probably only going to see decommitments. I don't even know how much this staff is honestly recruiting, because I think at this point, most of them know that at the end of the season, there's a good chance Mac Brown isn't going to be here. I would be stunned if the hire comes from within this staff. I don't see it. I mean, maybe Jeff Collins, but with what we've seen the last month or so from this defense, you shouldn't even want to touch that. The other one that I think a lot of people would probably look at and say and point to because of what was said after Mac Brown's near retirement on the spot following the game against James Madison would be Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens has never coached at the college level, and he's only been a head coach for 1 year at any level of football. So to me, it does not make any sense that he's going to be the guy, and that means that more than likely, most of, if not everyone on this staff would not be back with whoever Carolina brings in as their next coach. I know there's coaches that we really like here, guys like Lonnie Galloway, who I think have done a really good job, producing wide receivers. We've seen it with what he's done in the draft. I think Larry Porter is a fantastic running backs coach. We've seen the success that group has had. I mean, just look at the success that Davian Gauss had when he was in there as a true freshman. It shows that whatever he is doing to prepare these guys is working. The problem is that when you have a new staff come in, especially if it's going to be someone that isn't nearly as seasoned as a head coach, they're going to want their guys, and they don't have connections to these guys. So more than likely, this staff is not recruiting nearly as hard until they know for sure that Mac Brown is either coming back or that someone on this staff is taking over, and they're keeping most of these guys in place. With that means that Carolina is now down to just 12 commits remaining in the class, which now sits 60th in the country and 15th in the ACC. This was going to be a smaller class to begin with, but I think now with the storyline of Mac Brown possibly retiring at the end of the year or however they're going to go about that, I think this class could be one of the smaller that you've seen. This is the thing is, even when Mac Brown first got back here, yes, there was an early signing period. It was a big deal. Carolina needed to get a guy like Sam Howell in there. You could still do some damage at that time in the regular signing window. There were a lot of guys that were still on the board, and so that's what Carolina did. I don't think that's going to be the case this time around, and that's why for Carolina, they probably can't mess around at the end of the season if they're going to move on from Mac Brown, and even then, it's going to be really difficult to put together a solid class. Even one that'll be able to supplant a lot of what Carolina is probably going to lose to the portal. That means that Carolina will probably be portal heavy this time around. That's the only good news about the transfer portal and how it works, is that there is sort of that backup plan if you don't bring in a great recruiting class. The guy to watch now that could be the next decommitment from this class is 3-star linebacker / edge rusher Anthony Crua. We've been talking about him for a while now as someone that has been looking at Georgia. Georgia was very aggressive with him in the offseason. Of course, had him take an official visit. That was the only other official visit that he took besides the one that he took to Chapel Hill. And so we'll see. Ultimately, I think it's probably going to happen, especially with the fact that he has been to each of Georgia's last 2 home games for visits. That pretty much shows you when you visit back-to-back weeks, it's basically telling everybody, this is the place that I want to be, and I'm just waiting. I have no idea what he's waiting for, but I would not be shocked if within the next couple of days, especially within the next couple of weeks, if he ends up flipping his commitment. Now, the rest of the class, this is what I think most people are worried about. I don't think there is a concern about some of the other lower ranked guys. I think, honestly, if some of those guys were to leave, most people would probably be okay with it. The biggest concern that it seems like most people have now is Bryce Baker. And it's very understandable. He is the 4-star quarterback that's really, the anchor of this class, him and probably 4-star offensive tackle Alex Payne. From what I've seen, there's no worry of either one of those guys straying. Now, with Payne, you wonder about him being in the state of Georgia, if that could have some sort of effect. But Bryce Baker, I mean, that's a guy that's been getting recruited by big-time national teams for a while now. Alabama was interested in him. It feels like if they were going to try to jump on him, it would have happened earlier. Now, it's certainly possible, but I think this is the type of guy that is probably committed to the university, and he will more than likely be a member of this class. Now, this could change in the flip of a switch. We could come back on here in a week, and all of a sudden we're talking about the fact that, Bryce Baker is being heavily recruited by Georgia or Alabama or something like that, and all of a sudden he's interested in leaving. You never really know. But right now, I feel pretty secure that he is going to be a part of this class. And not everybody's going to jump off the ship here. That's the big thing to know, is that this is a lot of these guys probably look at this as their best opportunity and will probably hold on to their commitments. So we'll see. It's going to be worth monitoring here over the next few weeks, and especially as the team comes down to the end of the season. And that's why it's going to have to be a pretty decisive move very quickly from Carolina on what they are going to do when it comes to the head coach. Well, let's move on to the second half of the season, because as I told you guys, the second half of the year starts on Saturday for Carolina. And I know that technically, especially if Carolina doesn't make a bowl game, technically this is not the second half of the year. They've already played 7 games. But really, you look at it, especially, if they make a bowl game, then you don't have to worry about it. It is the halfway point, whatever. But we're going to call the final 5 games of the regular season the second half of the year. And so there are 5 things that I came up with that I want to see from this team in the second half of the season. The first one is very easy. And you could say, well, it seems obvious. The goal is to get to a bowl game, and it's still possible. You have to go 3-2 down the stretch of this season. And look, at the beginning of the year, we thought, okay, that's going to basically be almost impossible. You're going to have 2 teams that could be competing, could actually end up meeting in Charlotte, in Florida State and NC State. You have a tough road trip to Boston College, and you got to go to Charlottesville to play Virginia, a place that you don't really succeed. Wake Forest is in there, but that was one that I think we all kind of felt good about, especially with Carolina's recent success and Wake Forest also having some issues themselves. Well, now, here's the thing that's amazing about this stretch to close out the season. The best team on the schedule remaining, I would probably say it's NC State, because I really believe that last week was them starting to turn things around. I hate to say it. I hope it's not true, but we've seen this story before from NC State where they start out slow and all of a sudden they rally. It felt like last week going on the road, beating Cal out there. Maybe that's what ends up turning this season in the right direction for them. Whatever, so be it. That's a game that Carolina still has at home. There's a chance that you should be able to compete in that game if your guys actually play with the effort that you're supposed to, although that's a big question mark. You look at Virginia, that might be the second toughest game, and that's the one that you play this week. You're coming off a bye week, so that probably helps you. Virginia's coming off a loss last week to Clemson, where they felt like they were in the game for the first half and then got ran away from. I'm not saying that's what takes sort of the steam out of Virginia's sails, but who knows? Maybe that is what sort of turns the tide on their season too. They're a team that's kind of been up and down. They have a quarterback who is a gunslinger, so there's moments where he looks really good, completes a lot of passes. There's other moments where he's turning the football over a lot. So Carolina, I think there's an opportunity for them in that game. You look at Florida State, that is nowhere near as difficult of a matchup as we thought it was coming in to the season. That should be, when it's all said and done, the worst team in the ACC. Right now, that's you, because you haven't won a conference game and Florida State has. But there is no way that Florida State should beat you. they're a team that's just in complete turmoil right now. It is so disastrous that honestly, I don't see how Mike Norvell's keeping his job at the end of the year. I don't care that they went 13-0 last year. This is a team that could be staring down the barrel of a 1-11 season. They have tried 3 different quarterbacks. None of them have been successful. So that's a game that you should feel like going in, even though it's on the road, you should be able to take. Wake Forest, another game that you should feel like you should be able to take. At home, Wake Forest defense still struggling. I know their offense is really good, but that's no different than any of the other matchups that Carolina has had with them. That's a game that going in, you should expect to win. So right there, Florida State and Wake Forest, those are 2 games that you should expect to win. And if you do, then you're at 5 wins. And it's just get one of Virginia, Boston College, both on the road, and then home against NC State. Boston College also not as difficult as we thought it was going to be earlier in the season, especially when they went up there, competed with Missouri. I thought they were a team that had a chance to be a factor in the ACC championship race. After last weekend, they are not. They are a team that I think is probably going to be hovering right around bowl eligibility. Their offense is struggling as well with Thomas Castellanos not really being able to throw the ball all that well. There is opportunity here. It's about stepping up and actually taking the opportunity. So to me, I feel like looking at the slate that you have moving forward, I don't care how bad this team has played so far this year. If you don't get to a bowl game, you have a right to be disappointed as a Tar Heel football fan. The second thing that I want to see happen in the second half of the season is I want to see Jacoby Criswell prove that he is the guy at quarterback and that he is going to be the guy next year. And I just talked about Bryce Baker. The thing to me, though, is that when you look at the success that Sam Howell had, that Drake May had, the thing to remember with Drake May, he didn't even start as a true freshman. A lot of people want Bryce Baker to come in and take over immediately, start as a true freshman. It worked with Sam Howell. It's not guaranteed to work with Bryce Baker, especially because you have absolutely no idea what this room is going to look, what this offense is going to look like after this offseason. You would expect that Amarian Hampton is going to depart. You know that you're losing guys like J.J. Jones, John Copenhaver. Those guys will be gone at the end of the year. A couple of offensive linemen, Willie Lampkin, that's a huge one. Austin Blasky will all be gone at the end of the season. But then there's the possibility and almost certainty, I would think at this point, that you're going to lose Bryson Nesbitt. I would expect him to probably go to the NFL, and it's probably a smart move, especially with all the injuries that he has suffered. Go now, get your money. Hopefully you can stay healthier at the NFL level. And who knows if Mac Brown does leave, where do some of these receivers go? Are they going to stay? Are they going to head to the transfer portal? Are they guys that were committed to Mac Brown more than committed to the university? That is certainly on the table. So Jacoby Criswell is a guy that I feel like if he can prove that he is the guy, no matter what happens, I don't see him going anywhere. I think he's going to stay here. He's going to play out the rest of his career. And having a veteran quarterback that can lead your offense up and down the field, all he's got to do, to me, if you look the way that you looked in the game against Georgia Tech, would like you to clean up the fumble early in the game. But if you look like you look for the rest of that game, use your mobility, really, hone in on some of those deep passes, get that accuracy a little more shored up, and continue to do what you've done in the short and intermediate passing game, I think that Jacoby Criswell can lead this team to success under a new head coach. That's what I'm hoping that he does, because asking Bryce Baker to do it with a cast of characters that may not be anywhere near as good as what Sam Howell was playing with when he first got here, I think that may be asking Bryce Baker just a little bit too much. The third thing that I want to see Amarian Hampton reach 1,800 scrimmage yards, and that's certainly on the table. Look, 2,000 would be amazing, but I just don't think there's enough time left in this season. I mean, he is 5th in the country in scrimmage yards so far this year. I think that Carolina is going to continue to lean on him, as they should, for the rest of the season. And I hope that he can get to that 1,800-yard mark. I think that'd still be a special year for him. Maybe find the end zone a little bit more here in the second half. If he could get to 15 total touchdowns, I think that would be a great season for him, and one that he could feel happy about going out. Because let's be honest, right now, there's not really much to accomplish here. This team is not coming back and making it to the ACC championship game. Reaching a bowl game seems like it would be, pretty great at this point with where the season is at currently at 3-4. So I think that for Omarion Hampton, putting together a strong season for you to close out your career here, challenging in some of those records that previous guys before you have held here at Carolina, and really stamping yourself in that group of guys that, unfortunately, because of the issues that we've had defensively and elsewhere, ends up being a wasted player, but make it a guy that I think Carolina fans will remember for years to come. Look, I don't think it matters really what he does the rest of the year. He will be remembered, but especially if he is a guy that can reach that 1,800-yard mark, we will be saying, this is why we are frustrated as a fan base, and hopefully finding the next coach, the next young coach that can come in and take over this program, they will be able to capitalize on having special players like this. Fourth thing that I want to see, get these young guys on defense to play a little more. My thing is you look at the defensive line, they're rotating a ton of guys, and I love that. I think that even though that group hasn't been as effective as they were earlier in the season, it's probably the group that's been the most successful sustainably throughout this stretch. And again, that doesn't mean that they've been great, but they have been rotating guys in to try to find answers. Linebacker, and especially in the secondary, they have not been doing that. Now, look, I don't think that Power Echols and Amari Campbell are problems. I think they're struggling right now. They're guys that are constantly out of position. They've got to get that figured out because they are talented enough players. It's just for some reason they're not where they need to be. The secondary is where I really want to see a lot of the young guys start to play. Elijah Huzzy is having a great season. He's a guy that should be out there. The rest of this group, you've got to start seeing what some of these other guys have. You got to figure out if there are solutions in this secondary or if they need to go out in the transfer portal and find different guys that can actually help this team in the offseason, regardless of if Mac Brown stays or not. I think, especially at safety, you've got to start looking at some of these other guys because, man, Jakeem Harris, Stick Lane, they have been downright horrible this year. There is just no way around it. We thought that the safety play this year, especially with Mac Brown preaching that he loved the two deep at that spot, best two deep on the roster, that would be a position of strength. That might be the biggest position of weakness on this entire team. And that's really saying something because, man, there are some areas on this team that are really rough. But with the missed tackles, the lack of help in coverage, and even when they've been in coverage, sometimes, especially Stick Lane, getting beat down the field consistently, it's at some point, it's got to be enough. Play Will Hardy. Let's see if DeAndre Boykins can help you out. And if they can't, let's start seeing guys like Jaden Patterson, Jalen Thompson, Malcolm Ziegler. Let's see these guys and really get an evaluation of what they are and give them, at least some sort of incentive to stay around here if Mac Brown does leave. If they prove that, hey, we are guys that are capable of succeeding at the college level, even if you do end up changing defensive schemes, they may say, hey, we're going to stick around and try to navigate Carolina through this period of time. If you leave them on the bench, they may say, look, we came here for Mac Brown. We didn't get much playing time. I think we're probably going to head out. So I want to see more of the young guys on defense, especially if it starts to become obvious that this team is not making a bowl game. That's when you need to start seeing some of these young guys even more often because it's all about the future. Once you're eliminated from bowl contention, it's all about the future. And so that's how I hope Carolina sort of takes it. And right now, you should start doing that anyways because it's not like this defense can really get much worse. The final thing that I want to see, man, please, for the love of God, beat NC State to close out the Mac Brown 2.0 era. There is a good chance that that might be Mac Brown's final game. I would be stunned if it isn't. Even if Carolina gets to a bowl game, if they are moving on from him, if he is retiring, the best thing for him to do is to step away after that game, because then it allows Carolina to conduct their coaching search, find their guy, and start recruiting immediately to try to put together some sort of decent recruiting class to help that next coach when they come in. I think the best way to send him out is to send him out with a win over NC State, because that is a team that the last 2 years has put the exclamation point on destroying Carolina's season down the stretch. It's clearly the program's biggest rival. And that's the program that has been saying for years about how Mac Brown was too old, no one should want to commit to him, all that kind of stuff. This would be the perfect way to send him out. Doesn't matter how good NC State is. We know that they've had their issues defensively. Offensively, they've had their ups and downs as well. This is a year where if Carolina brings it effort-wise, and that's the biggest thing, and if this is Mac Brown's last game, then these players better bring the effort. And that's how they should think about it going in. I don't care what Mac Brown tells you. There is a good chance that this is going to be his last game on November 30th in your home stadium against NC State. I think Tar Heel fans, when he comes out, they should greet him warmly, even though this hasn't been exactly what we were hoping for, as we've gotten towards the end here. But this needs to be a game where Carolina shows up and is ready to go for their head coach and finds a way to beat NC State at the end of the season. That's the biggest thing that I want to see for this team when it's all said and done. I think it's all that stuff that we just listed out is certainly possible. And I think if all that stuff was to happen, even with how frustrated we are right now, we would leave this season feeling pretty decent about where Carolina is as a program if they are, in fact, transitioning to a new coach. So, guys, we're at the midseason point, as I mentioned. Head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. We got the midseason grades up there for you guys to check out. Really want you guys to do that. That's always one of the funner things that we do throughout the year. It's kind of grade these guys. We'll do the same thing at the end of the year with our final grades. Also on the website, plenty of stuff about the decommitments of Marshall Pritchett Jr. as well as Logan Farrell. And we're going to have you covered on everything surrounding Anthony Crua and whether or not he ends up decommitting and any other guys in this recruiting class. And, of course, we will be previewing every game, recapping every game for you on the website as well. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. Saturday is going to be a little bit weird. I do have to work that night. So I'm going to hope with Carolina playing at 12 that I can still get the majority of that recap done and hopefully out to you guys before I have to go into work. But if not, if it doesn't get released on Saturday, it will be up there on Sunday, my 5 takeaways from the game. And then, of course, we'll have everything else covered for you this week. I am going to put out the preview for this game tomorrow. Keep an eye out for that. And then later on in the day, hopefully, I will be putting out an article that will update you on all of the injuries. Carolina getting some big names back that can hopefully help them out. And there'll be a couple other guys that still won't be able to play this week. So we'll tell you all about that stuff. So keep an eye on heeltoughblog.com. Meanwhile, the podcast side of things, we encourage you guys, if you are listening, even if you're watching right now, one of the best things that you can do is go to wherever you listen to your podcast, search the Heel Tough Blog podcast, and subscribe to it. When you're in the car, on your way to work, whatever, that's the best way to listen to it. I know that some of you guys may like the visual, and I love that we get to be able to do it live. But if you're listening back to us later on, that's the best way to do it, is to subscribe and listen to it in podcast form, which we make sure we put up every edition for you guys. So make sure you do that. And again, we will have you covered with everything that is going on around Tar Heel football for the rest of the season. On that side of things, basketball, Carolina basketball is here, guys. Sunday is the exhibition, and then Carolina gets ready to start their 2024-25 regular season. And it's one that is not nearly as hyped up as some of the years in the past, but it's a team that I think has a chance to be really, really good. And so me and Josh will be having you covered all throughout the season. Josh will take care of almost every recap for you guys on the website side of things, almost every preview for you guys. There'll be some times where I'll jump in there. And then on the podcast side of things, the Four Corners podcast, just like with the Heel Tough Blog podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the additions. He's got a bunch of guests that are going to be coming on. Joel Berry, Debbie Antonelli, who covered the scrimmage for ESPN. So she'll be on to talk about that. Plenty of other great guests that we're hoping to get lined up throughout the year. So make sure that you guys don't miss any of that throughout the year. It's going to be amazing. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening tonight. And as always, go Tar Heels.